RT has a really bone-chilling article about a recent terror attack that happened in France last week. And let me just say here real quick. These are now happening so often that I follow the news for a living. Like, I have to be on top of it. I have missed some because of how often the terrorist attacks happen. That, like, now it occupies one news cycle and then it's gone. Whereas it used to be the case that if there's a terror attack, oh my God, you talk about it for a week. Now they're happening so frequently that it's like, okay, here's one. Oh, this one was actually relatively small in nature because very few people died. So, hey, it's like a blip on the radar screen, which is a crazy thing. Because you never want to become so accustomed to it that it's just like, oh, it is what it is. It's called Tuesday. No, that's not good. So, they explain here in the article, 2 nuns who were taken hostage by 2 jihadists in a Normandy church on Tuesday gave accounts of their ordeals. They said one of the attackers smiled happily after slitting Father Jacques Hamel's throat, and a bizarre theological dispute followed the crime. One sister said both attackers were obviously nervous and aggressive, but killing Father Jacques seemed to please one of them. Wow. So the 2 attackers were 19 years old. They eventually were killed. They tried to get away, but they were shot by police at a certain point. If I'm not mistaken, they tried to use the nuns as shields. And then they had sniper fire on them, and they were obviously afraid that they were going to kill the nuns, so they ended up taking them out. Let me give you the exact quote from one of the nuns here. This is bone-chilling. I got a smile from the second man. Not a smile of triumph, but a soft smile. That of someone who is happy. The men then had a conversation about religion with their female hostages. One asked Sister Helene if she was familiar with the Quran. Quote, yes, I respect it like I respect the Bible. I've read several surahs, and those that hit me in particular are the surahs about peace, she responded. Remember, this is right after they slit the throat and killed the priest. One of the attackers replied, peace, it's what we want. When you talk to the television, tell the authorities that as long as there are bombs on Syria, we will continue our attacks, and they will happen every day. When you stop, we will stop. Later, one of the attackers tried to convince them that Jesus could not be both a man and a god. And then you had the nuns basically downplay the situation and say, okay, maybe you're right, because obviously they didn't want to get killed. But what a bizarre scenario we have here. So, this case is very indicative of the profile of many of these jihadist terrorists against the West. You have what is likely a mix of many different factors going into play here. You have somebody who, it's possible, though not necessary, but it's possible that there's some genuine psychological imbalance, some deep-seated mental illness. They're psychopaths, they're sociopaths. Again, that's possible, though not required, not necessary to do something like this. And then the real, story here and the real motive can be found in the last part that I just read to you. So, first of all, the fact that they're getting into a theological dispute, and basically one of the attackers is trying to convince them that, no, Muhammad is the prophet, and Allah is God, even though that means God is God. But the Quran is the holiest, and Jesus cannot be God because he can't be a man and a god. So it's almost like he's trying to, stake out his religious position and justify to the nuns, who are also religious people, but he's trying to explain to them, no, we're right, our religion is right, we're the one true religion. We're the one true religion. And he's so convinced of that, and they're so convinced of that they're willing to kill for that. So, on the one hand, you have deep, deep brainwashing. Fundamentalist Islamic brainwashing. But then on the other hand, you have, they're admitting it right here, and they're telling you, When you talk to the television, tell the authorities that as long as there are bombs on Syria, we will continue our attacks, and they will happen every day. When you stop, we will stop. Now, that's not to blame the West and say, oh, it's the West's fault, and that's not to say that it justifies the actions. Obviously, it doesn't justify the actions. That fucking priest wasn't dropping bombs over Syria, so their argument, when it comes down to it, makes no sense. He's not attacking Syria. But understand that this is part of what goes on in the minds of jihadists and terrorists who strike against the West specifically. So when you have Salafi jihadists and you have Wahhabi Muslims in Saudi Arabia, for example, who treat women like shit, they want to kill gays. That's got nothing to do with the West. That's got nothing to do with U.S. imperialism. That's the ideology run amok and fundamentalists who really believe their religion. That's one problem. Then there is another problem where oftentimes the attacks that are directed against the West, yes, some of that has to do with politics and geopolitics and revenge and retribution. Oftentimes it's, oh my God, you killed a family member of mine with a drone. Now I'm going to go join the people who are fighting back against you because fuck you. You just took away the only thing in my life that I really cared about, my family or my friends. So this story is really a Rorschach test for the different sides of this debate. Because some people, most of the time progressives, like to only focus on terrorism being a response to Western imperialism and the actions of the West. Well, there's enough evidence of that in this story that they could just harp away on that angle of it. But then obviously the other group of people likes to argue, no, if you say it has anything to do with the West at all and imperialism, you're an apologist for terrorism, and it only has to do with Islam, and it only has to do with fundamentalism and extremism, and everything else is just distracting from that core issue. Well, guys, here we have a case where it is clear that it was a mix of factors. And if you can't admit that it is a mix of factors, then you're a silly person playing for a team, and you only care about your precious narrative. Whether that narrative is always at all costs just blame their religion, or that narrative is always at all costs blame the West and say it's foreign policy. No, here we have both things, and it is crystal clear. If you have somebody who's arguing with nuns about theology and trying to convince them, no, Jesus can't be God, Muhammad's the prophet, and Islam is correct, and that's it. That's what it is. I'm so convinced I'm right. I was born into the special religion, and I believe it to my core. Well, he's telling you, yes, I'm doing this partly because of my religion and because I'm brainwashed by it and because I believe it and I'm a fundamentalist. So that aspect is in the story. The aspect is also in the story of, this has to do with fucking Syria. Stop dropping bombs on Muslims, and I'll stop fucking attacking you. Both things are true, and both things can be true. And when the evidence points in that direction, and you have a mix of factors, if you're in one of the groups that only harps away on the religion angle, or you only harp away on the U.S. imperialism foreign policy angle, you're so blinded by your narrative that you can't see the obvious evidence presented to you, and you can't admit when the other side is half right. Here's a story where both sides are half right. And like I said, there may even be the third aspect, though I don't know for sure, of they're also just mentally ill and crazy. So, but that's what we're seeing here. And as a final note here, let me be clear about something. I'm not saying every act of terrorism is a mix of these different factors. I'm sure many of them are, but yeah, there are some that are purely retribution and revenge against the West, and there are some that are purely driven by rational, real-world grievances. That doesn't justify it, that explains it. There are some attacks that are of that nature. There are also attacks that are just from out-and-out Kool-Aid drinking, brainwashed, I believe every word of my religion morons. That's also a thing. And then again, some are a mix. So there's a spectrum. This is one on the spectrum where there's truth in both camps, and it would be nice if everybody admits that. But either way, the main takeaway here is this is a grotesque cancer on the planet. And smart people need to come together and find a way to defeat what's happening here in the realm of ideas and practically in the real world.